I am on Unit 3, Lesson 4. Okay. So today we're going to be talking about literal equations. So what is a literal equation? Well, a literal equation is a mathematical equation that involves more than one. I'll give you a hint. X, Y, Z, F. What are all of those? Variables. More than one variable. Okay, that's your fill-in. The word is variable. Bless you. Variable. So go ahead and get that word down. And then we'll get moving on to the next slide. So take a second to get that down. So moving on. Alex,
We can't see the screen.
Oh, I'll share it with you. My bad. So the word is variable for the first fill-in, but I will share my screen. You can see it now?
Yeah.
Okay, the first word is variable. All right, moving on. So, how do you solve a literal equation? Well, you determine the location of the variable you are asked to solve for, and then you use the same solving methods you do when you're solving equations with numbers. So you have to get that variable by itself. So we use reverse operations like addition, reversing subtraction, subtraction, reversing addition, division, reversing multiplication, and multiplication, reversing division, such as those examples, okay? So let's go ahead and talk through how we solve a normal equation. So let's say we want to solve this equation for x. What would you guys suggest that I do to solve for x here?
-7.
Good, we're going to subtract 7 on both sides, right? We're going to subtract 7 on both sides. And when I do that, I'm left with x is equal to -19, right? -19, because -12 minus 7 is -19. So, do you guys have any general questions about how I did this one? Anything? Thank you. Any questions about this at all? Okay, so we're going to use the same mindset to do the next problem.
Where did I go?
The front office, and ask for Miss Johnson.
Okay. No,
Sorry,
I'll get it.
he'll be good. Thank you, though. So now we're going to use the same process that we just did on the last question. We want to solve for A. So when you say solve for A, you want to get A alone on one side of the equation, okay? So how would I get rid of the B that's in the way of the A being alone?
-B.
Subtract B. You're going to subtract B on both sides. That's going to cancel out the B on my left, and that's going to leave me with A equals C minus B. So the main difference between a regular equation and a literal equation is that you can't actually simplify what you get on the right. See how we could normally, if it was like numbers, if it were like 10 and 4, we would subtract and get 6. But with a literal equation, we don't know what C is, and we don't know what B is, so we just kind of leave it in that state where we haven't fully simplified it. So does anybody have any questions about that so far? Okay. So let's look at the next example of a regular equation. So say that we want to solve for x. What would you guys suggest I do to solve for x?
+6.
Well, this is multiplication.
Oh yeah, divided by -6.
Good. So if we want to reverse multiplication in math, we use division, and we divide both sides by that number that's in front of the x. This allows me to cancel out that -6 on my left, which leaves me with x by itself, which was our goal. And what is -30 divided by -6?
5.
Yeah, +5. +5.
Were you about to put a negative sign?
I was like, I thought when I first saw it from an angle, it looked like it was just the equal sign, and then I'm like, oh, it's a negative, yeah. So the answer there is +5. And you could plug +5 back into the original equations to check your work. Alex, you want participation credit? All right, moving on. Do you guys have any questions for me so far? So let's try the same rules, but let's try it for a literal equation. So we want to solve for r. So look at the side with r on it. What is in the way of the r being by itself? The 2 and the pi. Good, the 2 and the pi. So 2 and pi are being multiplied by the r, right? You guys see how it's being multiplied? So what reverses multiplication in math? Division, very good. So we're going to divide both sides by that 2 pi. And when I do that, that's going to cancel out the 2 pi on my right where I want r by itself, and I end up with c over 2 pi equals r, okay? So we just basically divided both sides by that 2 pi to get the r by itself. And you can't simplify this. So that's the weird thing about literal equations. The main difference is you're not able to fully simplify the answer, okay? The answer just comes out to be whatever it is, so you're not going to be simplifying anything. So in a way, it's actually a little bit easier because you have a little less math to do, a little bit less arithmetic. You just kind of leave it in that state. So does anyone have any questions for me on this one? All right, cool. Let's go ahead and try the next one. So the first one that we're going to do up here is we're going to solve for x, and this is a two-step equation. So what's in the way of x being by itself? The 2 and the 3. How can we get rid of the 2 first? We always got to get rid of the one without the variable first. So how can I get rid of that 2? Good. I'm going to subtract 2 on both sides. And that's going to leave me with 12 equals 3x. Okay? 12 equals 3x. Now from here, we now want to get the x by itself. So what should I do here? What do you guys think?
Divide both sides by 3.
Good. So to reverse multiplication in math, we do division. So I'm going to divide both sides by 3. And that's going to leave me with x equals 4 as my answer to this question. So with a regular equation, we can solve and get a number answer. But with a literal equation, we can't do that. We can only get just more letters but moved around. So this time, we want to solve for L. Okay? So this looks complicated, but it's actually really a lot more simple than it looks. Okay? It's the same thing as what we did in the last one. So I want to get the L by itself. So there's something being multiplied by the L, the pi r, and there's also this pi r squared on the side being added to it. So I need to get rid of the addition first. So how do I reverse addition in math? Subtraction. So we need to subtract pi r squared on both sides. We need to subtract pi r squared on both sides. These cancel out, and we're left with s minus pi r squared equals, we're left with this on this side, pi r l. So I moved the pi r squared to the other side by subtraction. We can't simplify s minus pi r squared, so we just leave it like that. We can't do anything with it. We're just going to leave it like that, okay? Now, we want to get L by itself, so let's keep our eye on the goal here. What is being done between the L and the R and the pi? What is this? Good, this is multiplication, right? The operation here is multiplication. So remind me, how do I reverse multiplication in math? Division. I'm going to use division here. These cancel out, okay? And I'm left with L equals. Now you can divide each of these terms by the pi r. So I have s divided by the pi r, and then I have negative pi r squared divided by the pi r, okay? So I basically just divided each term separately by the pi r. So take a second to look this over before we go into the next step on this.
Hold on, when you get done, can you go to the first one because I had it printed out?
Yeah, sure. I'll go back at the end. No problem.
Okay.
Just remind me at the end. So, we're at this step. Now we can't do anything with this term, right? Can't do anything with, I don't have anything in common. But over here, do we have anything that looks common? Yeah, so let me write it out for you this way. So let's think about it. I'm going to rewrite the first one as is. We can't do anything with it. And I'm going to write out the second one as pi times r over r equals L. So does everybody understand why I was able to write the r squared as r times r? Does anyone have any questions about why I did that or how I did it? So anytime you have x times x, it's the same thing as x squared. So you can also write x squared as x times x. Same with r squared. So I forgot about the pi down here. Don't forget about that. So we're going to determine what we can cancel out, and that's what's common in the numerator and the denominator. So what do I have common in this numerator and denominator here? We can cancel out the pi's, right? And we can also cancel out one set of the r's. Why can't we cancel out this other r right here?
Because there's nothing to cancel it out.
Yeah, there's nothing to cancel it out, right? I can't divide it by anything. It's just there. So the simplified version of my answer is going to be s over pi r minus r is equal to L. So that one's a little bit tricky, but I know you guys are able to do it. It just takes a little bit of time and solving and knowledge, okay? You guys are all capable of that. You just have to kind of think step by step here. So before we move on to our last set of examples, does anyone have a question for me to clarify anything so far? Okay, so we'll go ahead and move on then. So now we're going to solve this one here, which is x minus 5 over 2 is equal to 10. So the first thing we want to do, please don't write on the wall. The first thing we want to do is we want to get rid of the 2 in the denominator. So this is division. So in math, how do we reverse division? Good. So we multiply both sides by whatever's in that denominator, and that's going to cancel out the denominator for us to get rid of that fraction. And that's going to leave me with x minus 5 is equal to 20. That's where I get at this point. So we have a two-step equation. We're one step in. We have one step left. We have to get that x by itself. So how would I get x by itself here?
Divide both sides by 5?
Not divide, because we're going to reverse subtractions.
Oh. So we add both sides by 5?
Good. Yes. And then we're going to get x equals 25. And that would be our final answer on that one. Take a second to look it over, make sure you understand. Do you guys have any questions? Alright, let's try the last literal equation. So our goal here is to solve for w. So we look at what are the obstacles in our way. Well, we have this negative 10e, but we also have this big M divided by everything. So I want to get rid of this M on the denominator. That's division. Denominator indicates division. So how do I get rid of division in math? Multiplication. I'm going to multiply both sides by that M denominator, which is going to allow me to cancel out the denominator and not have a fraction anymore. That's going to leave me with M times S. You can write it in either order because multiplication is a commutative property. Equals W minus 10e. So we get to that point so far. Now we want W to be by itself. So what's in the way of W being by itself? Over here. Negative 10e. We're subtracting away a 10e. So what reverses subtraction in math? Addition. We're going to add 10e to both sides. That's going to allow me to cancel out the 10e on my right, and that's going to leave me with ms plus 10e equals the w that's left over here. And that would be our final answer because we've gotten w by itself. You know you're done with the problem when whatever you're solving for is alone on one side of the equation. That's when you know you finished it. So a lot of times with literal equations, you can't actually really add or subtract or divide anything. You're just going to leave it in terms of the variables, meaning you're going to just leave it with the letters and not worry about any of the numbers. So it's actually a little bit easier if you get a hang of it and don't look at it as being weird or anything like that. And just think of it as like it were numbers. So, does anybody have any questions for me before we end the lesson? Okay, I'll stop it.